Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Ahoy there, everyone. Welcome to episode number 102 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. This weekly podcast is your best bet for staying afloat when it comes to the development of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the upcoming MMORPG by Visionary Realms. In this week's episode, we'll unfurl the May Producers Letter to see if we can find the treasure map to Alpha. We'll sail into a conversation about class roles, we'll swab the old Rewind mailbox, and we'll finish up with a sailor's tale in the lore section. So come aboard with me, Theric, and my seaworthy co-host, Desrin, for this week's Rewind. Well, hello there, Desrin. How are you doing today, man?
Arrgh, I be great, matey.
How long did you practice that? How long did it take you to prep that response?
About 20 seconds before we started this, as you were reading the intro.
Nice. I wanted to continue on with the pirate theme, but I wasn't sure where to go with it, so that's perfect that you added that there. So that's great, man. I love a good theme, but yeah, no, you're doing well.
Yeah, totally good. Nice. Same old. It's a good week to be following Pantheon Rise of the Fallen.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, we got a big show. We got lots of stuff to talk about today, and I know our shows have been a little long lately, so let's get right to it and dive into it if that's all right with you. Let's talk about our adventuring party that is going to join us on this voyage today. We've got Ziplocs on the Darkmer Rogue. We've got Sparrow on the Elf Ranger. We've got Bounty Coat on the Human Wizard. Screech on the Scarbard. Wiki-Woo on the Human Enchanter. Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric. Horsasaurus on the Human Warrior. Daimlos on the Darkmer Cleric. Jason on the Scar Beardlord. Zerg-Jerk on the Dwarf Rogue. And Grogu on the Human Warrior. So that's a wonderful looking pirate crew we got going here, and I thank each and every one of you for supporting the show during the premiere last week or through Patreon. And if you'd like to help out and join the adventuring party for episode 103, feel free to drop a super donation, a chat. Man, getting it all mixed up. A super chat donation during the YouTube premiere. Or again, like I said, our Patreon campaign for a more permanent seat on the party. So thanks again to everyone who supports the Rewind, whether it's through that or just by showing up and hanging out with us for the hour that we are for the premiere. So having said that, I think I spot some land on the horizon. So Desrin, you ready to make landfall?
Cast ye anchor.
Wow, that's awesome. This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so this month's newsletter from VR came on May 19th. Desiree, I'm just laughing in my head still about your pirate. That is so great. Nothing groundbreaking in this newsletter, but definitely we have some stuff to talk about. Now, first up was the new hires and the work that they're doing for VR. We heard about these additions from VR to VR staff last week in the live stream, and this week in the newsletter, they sort of expanded on what they're doing. So they said that the new hires have, and I'm going to quote it here, begun to refine and expand upon the art of Pantheon, including further developing the visual footprint of Thronefast, creating modular building kits for human architecture, polishing the models of their existing player races, and expanding their animation suite. So, I'm kind of interested in the modular kits for human architecture for sure. And, I'd love to see, inside Thronefast at some point, making of Thronefast 2022 edition, maybe, because we've seen that before. I think that was 2017 that the last one was. Yeah, been a while. So it sounds like the same thing is sort of happening for the rest of the team. They're doing the same thing around Wild's End. One of the cool lines I found from the newsletter, they talked about, quote, rounding out the building kits that can be used to expand halfling influence elsewhere in Wild's End and in broader Terminus. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll see some halfling abodes in different lands abroad, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. If they're out exploring the world, that kind of thing. Something to keep an eye out for. I do like that it sounds like VR is being very cognizant of each race's architecture and how it needs to be its own thing. Human buildings are going to have certain characteristics, and halfling buildings, even the ones we've seen more recently, have other characteristics. And for me, like that's pretty important. And I'm going to steal your thunder here a bit, Des, because I'm going to mention Vanguard preemptively before you can, because that was really a key element in Vanguard's game design in terms of each of the three main races or regions having their own design styles. So the Thestrin, the Kojani, and the Qualian. Kalian, I don't know how to pronounce that. Kalian. Yeah, they were all basically had their own signature design, and it played into it when you were crafting your house or your boat. They all had various styles. Even the armor and the different other things you could craft had different styles to them. So, when thinking about these modular kits and using these to design, Pantheon's different races and areas of the world, I think it's really cool. So, Desrin, considering the 9 playable races of Terminus, how important for you is it that each structure, be clearly sort of differentiated by the race? And is there any one in particular that you would want to see more than others?
Man, I mean, yeah, it's huge. I think it's a big deal, but it is funny you kind of mentioned Vanguard, because when we're talking about modular kits, I think what comes to mind for anyone that's played is this kind of like a conflicting thing where, yeah, each continent had its particular style, but also it was really obvious that the assets were reused over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably like a limitation of the technology at the time.
And their time. Yeah, just how many people and how much time they had. But nowadays, when we're talking about like modular kits, it's usually referencing a much like smaller pieces rather than like a whole building. So it's kind of where an artist can take a bunch of these little segments, put them together to create something that shares a style, but it's actually unique. And unfortunately, that practice has come a long way since the days of Vanguard. So I'm hoping we won't see the same copy and paste look that I would think of immediately when I think of Vanguard's different styles. But as far as what I'm looking forward to for like architecture, actually Archai. I mean, obviously I'm maining an Archai, so not a huge surprise, but it's mainly because I actually don't have any idea how their buildings might look. We've seen a lot of concepts of the other races, right? But I don't recall seeing Archai building.
I don't think we have. No, and it's I don't think we have for sure. And because they're located on Whitethaw on the continent, in the southern continent. Yeah, we definitely haven't seen anything concept art or anything else beyond that. I kind of imagine them living in, I don't know why crystals sort of come to mind when I think of the Archai.
I do too, yeah.
Because the elemental aspect of them and their elemental attunements. So, like what was like Superman's homeworld? Remember he had like that crystal fortress in the old movies?
I think kind of like geodes as well, that kind of a look, which is pretty cool.
Geode, yeah, exactly. That's actually better than the way I was thinking. Now I'm gonna picture that in my mind. So I'd love to see like them do like even if it's just concept art, just some designs about the different architectures amongst the races. I think that'd be pretty cool. Next up, they talked about vinyl, which of course we were expecting to hear about, and we want to hear about where they're at in terms of their implementation of their networking solution. And we did. They said that, quote, they're entering the final phases of vinyl implementation and are at the beginning to plan allocation for the myriad of systems and improvements that have been dependent on their new networking infrastructure. So, hearing final stages is encouraging. Of course, it would have been nice to hear it's done. But, if you're sort of keeping track in your mind of how long it's been, I did go back the other day and look, and it's been 9 weeks since the March newsletter told us that they were, going full time. And this was the focus, and nothing else could, not that nothing else could get done, but everything was going to be put into this at that time. And it basically had to get done and wouldn't stop until it was completed. So it's been 9 weeks, if you're keeping track. And one of the interesting things about this, I think, from this newsletter is talking about saying what's the top priority once it is done. We know about some of the things that are dependent, but they said converting our game world into its seamless state and support for dynamic entity spawns that will allow us to flesh out quests and encounters, as well as set the stage for their pet systems. Now, Desmond, let's talk about this for a second, because we know that certain classes, Ranger and others, are dependent on the networking being in place. We know about pet classes. We know the Summoner is a best example of that. But what about this seamless world and the dynamic entity spawns they mentioned here? What's your takeaway on that?
Okay, well, honestly, I feel like this is one of those things that they could have maybe worded a little better. We're just gonna not put in because I've already seen after people reading the newsletter, it's already causing some confusion. Because what do you mean convert the world to its seamless state? Like, wasn't that done already? Haven't we seen that? Right? Like, it causes
when I
questions.
read it for the first time. Yeah, when I read it for the first time, I had the same reaction. I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! I thought that was already done. I thought it was part of their terrain streaming technology. They talked about that in the past, and that was a big headline when they talked about it, right?
Right.
Because it was no more zone lines except for like dungeon entrances. So that was part of the conversation then. But it sounds like that isn't possible until the networking is done.
Well, so that's kind of the issue, right? Is we've been given this term with no description, and so everyone's kind of connecting it to other things with similar words, right? And and so without a description, we're kind of just stuck there. And I know it, like, they're not intending it to just be technobabble, I don't think, but like it is a little frustrating, I would say, to hear them kind of word things like beginning to plan allocation, like, right? Because like that sounds like, oh yeah, we're looking to schedule, like that's it just doesn't come across as straightforward, right? It's harder to read than I think it's probably even intended to be. So
yeah, I mean it does sound like sort of technical speak that doesn't maybe need to be so technical.
yeah.
I don't know. I am I guess a little confused as to what exactly how these two systems mesh together. I mean, or maybe what the interaction is between these two systems that requires it. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it was just interesting to me that there's more than there's higher priorities than some of the things that we didn't know about before. Like, we didn't know about this being a priority. In terms of what has to happen after the networking is implemented.
To give credit, I think listing priority is pretty cool, for sure. But we don't really know what the priority means, right? But so like let me try to take a shot at interpreting this. Okay, so
right.
To try to translate, I would say the network stack, Vinyl, is almost in and running. And once it's in, they have a few things on the checklist to make sure hooked up. And one of them is making sure that it all works with their streaming tech that they've talked about before. So, for example, I'm sure there's more than just like the streaming tech, on this checklist, so to speak, but it is a big deal. And if you think about it, though, it's one thing to let a developer kind of fly around seamlessly on one machine, which is what we've seen, right? But it's another thing to make sure that all of that is working while networked. And, since we've seen the world in a seamless state already, that's kind of what I presume is meant by that. But again, without a descriptor, don't really know. However, I would have just kind of bundled that into the Vinyl integration, honestly. If it's part of it, that whole checklist to make sure that everything's integrated. Because that's the word that's been used, integration.
Right.
I would just prefer like, oh, that's just part of integration. Let's throw that in. And so, I'm not trying to be negative, but as long as they don't, come back next month saying that, hey, Vinyl's in, but now, we've got to convert the world to its seamless state, and that's like the next milestone. And like, as long as we don't kind of get that cascading. Like, oh, well, I guess there was this other thing that we didn't know about. Oh, there's this other thing. And I'm sure a lot of people are afraid of that, but I'm sure it's fine. It's just a little maybe awkwardly worded. And and
Yeah.
we'll get an update within a few weeks anyway. So it's all good. But the last thing is dynamic entity spawns. I think that's just referring to kind of them improving their tools to do things like make an NPC or an item in the world spawn based on like kind of a few conditions, like from a quest, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I read from it too. The quest aspect of it. I actually in the newsletter, one of the things I didn't note in the notes here, but they did talk about it in one of the sections, and I'm trying to find it while we're talking. But basically, talked about building out the narrative of Thronefast and some of the storylines and tasks in that area, or Avenir's Pass, I think it was. So I think that this probably goes hand in hand with that. So it's nice to hear that the perception and all the stuff associated with that actually is, there's progress being made along that while this is going on. So, just that nice sort of multiple parallel workflows,
Yeah,
so it's not just
it's
one
nice
thing
to
or the
have an
other.
update, and for that I'm thankful.
Yeah. So that's that. Now the next one is really cool because it actually involves our show last week, which was all about, a big section of our show last week is about crafting. Talked about the schematics and covering the dev roundtable that Nefel appeared on, because crafting showed up in this newsletter. The quote from VR is that they've, quote, completed the initial implementation of our crafting and gathering systems, with both now in a playtest ready state. So that's great. It's ready to test and get ready to get in there and try our crafting out. But we need to go over some of the things because Nefel was in chat with us last week during the show, during the premiere. So sure enough, we're talking about crafting on the show, and we got our community in there and chatting away. And, people are going to take the opportunity to ask him some questions, which they did. So
naturally, yeah.
He dropped some really good clarifications. I know, Desmond, when we were there last week, we were both like, wow, just, great clarifications, both, very thankful for him to speak to some of these things, which of course is completely, unplanned and random, and just,
it's so cool that they will do this, like fairly often, hang out in Twitch chats, go to YouTube, leave comments, like you find VR comments on most obscure stuff. It's awesome.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to run through some of the clarifications that Neff provided. The first one, one of the questions came out during the show was like talking about how many professions you can have, because they were very clear that, that it's going to be limited in terms of your crafting professions, in terms of consumable and non-consumable. But the question was also raised about gathering, like, are you limited in your gathering professions? And Neff said, no, gathering is separate. You can learn all the gathering professions, specialize in 2, and master 1 of them. So, that's a pretty big information, and I don't think that was covered in the roundtable unless I missed it. But very, very cool to sort of get some definition on the gathering side of things. So yeah. And like I said, Desmond, jump in here anytime if you have any comments on any of these.
I mean, just on that one, I think it's incredibly awesome that you can do all the crafting, or I mean, all the gathering professions to some degree. Just because there are people that, love just gathering, and it kind of sucks to only be able to do 1 or 2 of them.
It sucks when you're running around and you see like a rare node and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And so I love this, and I know there's still specialization, which is awesome, but I just love that I'm not going to have to just pass a node because I'm just like barred from touching it for some reason,
Yeah. When you said bard there, I thought you were talking about the bard class. I'm like passing it because I'm a bard and I'm whatever. For some reason, I can't mine things. I don't know. And, anyway, another good clarification from Neff was about how schematics will be obtained in the game. Neff said, ways to find schematics. You can buy them from merchants, loot them, be given them by NPCs as rewards, trade for them with factions, and maybe other secret ways. So good little encapsulation of the all the ways that you could potentially obtain schematics in Pantheon.
Yeah.
Our friend Sparrow asked Neff about the nature of crafting. Like, what is the experience as a gameplay mechanic? What's it going to feel like for us as players? And Neff said it's more turn-based, although there will be things you need to respond to. But at least right now, the interaction won't put you on a clock where you have to press buttons immediately. So, so taking it a little bit away from the, more dynamic system to a more of a turn-based system. Not exactly, clearly defined.
I mean, I know what
not
I'm thinking of, and I'm pretty
what.
sure a lot of people could imagine this. It sounds like the Vanguard grafting method, just without grades and probably a little bit different. Because you weren't on a
Right.
time, a time limit, but you had all these choices you have to make, right? And
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
kind of feel like this is an evolution of a similar feel, not
Yeah.
being the same, of course, but that's what I'm thinking
Well,
of.
evolution is a good thing.
Yeah,
Evolution is a good thing. There's no need to reinvent the wheel if it works right.
that's right.
Um, so something else Neff talked about was how the schematic you're using will affect the visual of the final product. He said, usually the schematic will dictate the model that we use. He said he would like to have materials influence the textures and shaders, but that's for the art team's magic. So,
It's
you know,
another thing where I'm like, I wish they had gotten a tech artist back when they were talking about it. I'm crossing my fingers that they find some rock star technical artist that can hop on the team and bridge the gap for everyone on these crazy cool features like this.
yeah. Yeah. One of those, hope for the best, but hard to envision it. Maybe with the resources
It would be
available, but we'll
fine
see.
if it was just by schematic. It would be such a cool little addition.
Sure, absolutely. Our adventure party warrior, actually, Grogu, he's also had a really important question. He asked Nefel if about the potential for material loss, like what's the risk? So this was something that came up. I'm actually going to read Grogu's question. He said, "You talked about losing materials if the craft fails, which I'm okay with on easy materials, but I'm not sure about it with potentially losing a rare item. Maybe protect those ones from failure." And then, so Nefel said, "We'll probably protect some extremely rare materials from being lost, but I would not expect it unless we're talking about things that are almost unique." And there was a follow-up to that with our pal Walking Waste. He managed to dig a little more info from Nefel on it. He said, "I think losing a schematic is pretty damn punishing." And Nefel said, "Right now I'm leaning towards letting you keep the schematic if you fail, but we'll see how evil I feel when we implement this fully." So, everybody be nice to the Felk unless you want to lose your crafting schematic. It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
It is really a really important decision to make in terms of what is the line in terms of too much loss, too much on the line that'll cause people not to want to use the system. So I think it's something that a lot of testing is going to need to go into, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
They'll get it right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, like I said, fantastic that Nefel was, able to come over and hop in and hang out with us for the show. I want to give him a massive thank you for popping in because that's awesome. We do get, VR staff showing up randomly. So, we've had Joppa, we've had Tehom and Minus and others just come in and hang out. So you're always, there's always a chance that you'll get a chance to ask some questions off the cuff, and sometimes they can answer them, sometimes they can't, and whatever we can get, we'll take, right? So, we'll always recap it like this for you if that happens. So,
but also
don't
no
worry about
pressure, VR. If you just want to come hang out, that's fine too. We won't pile on to you.
Yeah, well, you're always welcome, but we're always gonna mine those beans. You know what we do. That's how the community is. We'd be bad podcasters if we didn't. So. So let's dig into the last big ticket item from this newsletter, Des, and that was the focus on the monk class in this newsletter from Tehom, talking about what the early monk experience is in Pantheon. So they've done this with the wizard before, and as it implies, it's trying to get us a feel for what rolling a certain class is going to feel like, basically up to level 10 or so. There's a ton of info in this article, and I'm not going to get into everything, but Desert, we do have to hit some of the points here. One of the most prevalent ideas throughout reading the article is, how the monk is good in battle over time. The flow of the battle and the progression of the battle over time is something that seemed to be referred to quite a bit. They said, quote, "Many monk abilities are themed around riding the ebb and flow of a battle and making conscientious decisions about when and why to use certain cooldowns or to attack from a certain position," end quote. So, we saw this in the wizard spotlight. It's about tactical decision making, but this is new when there's a positional element. So to attack from a certain position, it's interesting because our our friend Zergjerk in the community is a big fan of positioning, and actually we're going to have a question later on from him about this. And I don't know about you, Des, but I'm a DPS player through and through. I've always been. I'm trained to my core to try and flank and get behind my enemies at all times. Even, even when it's not actually a mechanic in the game, I still do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a conditioning thing. Any opinion on that? Any thought on what they're saying there?
I mean, I think maybe the monk might actually sometimes kind of be meant to be up front, like next to the tank, or on the side, or like I like that because, like you said, we're kind of programmed to always be behind the mob, and that might be kind of a little differentiator for the monk. The monk has to, stand by the tank and punch in the face, or slap from the side, or it's interesting, and I like it that it's different.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it opens up more tactical options and more interesting gameplay. So but the monk as an archetype, like where does it fit? Like what is it in the quaternity? If you're not familiar with that term, if you're new to the Pantheon community, VR did give us a bit of clarification on the monk's place in the quaternity. They said that, quote, the monk's early kit has been retuned from its original implementation to be more damage-oriented, while still providing a few tools and tricks useful for off-tanking and survivability. So, it sounds like they're moving away from the off-tank label, or at least trying to maybe change that off-tank label a little bit and get them into more of a flexible DPS realm, I guess. We talked about the VR going with the concept of classes flexing into other roles for a limited duration or with limited effectiveness. And they did comment on this in the newsletter about the monk, saying the monk has a variety of defensive cooldowns and aggro management tools. They are neither as robust nor immediately available to them as they would be to a dedicated tank's arsenal. So we're sort of fleshing out the monk flex, I guess. We've seen the rogue do this in a CC capacity. So all these, every time they do one of these class discussions and we learn about a little bit more about them, I think they become much more interesting and sort of dynamic. Again, class identity is one of the tenets of Pantheon's development philosophy, and I don't want to see them go too far away from what the class's role is. But what do you think? What do you think about this?
I mean, I think that they really are refining. That's the first kind of takeaway is the monk had some, what's kind of a big feature, right? A little while ago, like they did some videos on it. They actually showed the ability set. And what I especially like about this is that, when they're on the low level side, they want to be very clear about what the class is. And I think this is accomplishing it. And I think one of the best things about the monk showcase in this newsletter is kind of they're really situational. And I think, generally speaking, what's going on and reacting appropriately, it's going to be a key element to playing the monk. And actually, there's a quote that I grabbed here because I thought this was just perfect. And this is from the newsletter. It says, blowing a cooldown just because it's available typically won't provide much advantage. And it's here that the gulf between a mediocre monk and a masterful one will be most evident. And while I'm sure you could say this about Pantheon in general, it seems especially the focus for the monk. And I feel like they're trying to clearly define that, right?
Yeah, it's funny you grabbed that quote. I almost grabbed the same exact quote because it hit me too. And that's exactly right. And I just think of all the MMOs we play right now where we're just basically hitting buttons as soon as they're off cooldown, right?
Yep.
You're just like, I just, if it's available, why not do it, right? And I love that somebody's finally taking the concept and saying, you shouldn't hit the button right now. Just because it's available, you shouldn't hit the button right now. That's super important and surprisingly rare.
Yeah.
And so every time they do this, I hope they continue to use this approach with the other classes. And I think that it opens up a lot of interesting options and just better gameplay, just more thoughtful gameplay. So lots of interesting stuff. Though I don't want to be a mediocre monk. Nobody wants to be a
Right.
mediocre monk.
That's right. You want to be a
Right? I don't want to
masterful
be a
monk.
right. I want to be a radical ranger, not a not a reverse ranger. I don't know what the equivalent is. Something like that. Anyway, so that's my stuff from the monk article that stuck out to me. Anything else stick out to you?
Oh, well, it's funny you mentioned that. Of course I do. First of all, I love that this article started out with this massive emphasis right from the get-go that Pantheon is about the journey being meaningful and not just the end game. Like, that was how they led into this article, and that's awesome to be very clear. And so from that context, we kind of start this monk breakdown, and I love that they just are setting the precedent because everything in this article actually bounces off of that idea of the journey being the most meaningful. And so I think one of the biggest shifts that's kind of demonstrated in this article is that they're going away from or they're giving some examples of kind of how they're changing the onboarding process. Again, the journey. And, they mentioned this before, that they're kind of working on the new player experience a little bit and onboarding, and it's shifting towards kind of what I mentioned earlier, like starting out more focused on your primary role. And then as your character grows, you can start, expanding out to be more complex with your tooling, especially like finding yourself kind of able to do those flex roles in more fullness, right? And we've been talking about flex roles, basically it's like since the idea is introduced, and I think the new trajectory is a lot better, because when you're learning the game and learning your class, because again, I do not think Pantheon's going to be the kind of game to speed to 50 and not know how to play your class. It's going to be a wreck. It's going to be very evident.
Right.
But I think this new trajectory is just really a lot nicer to learning to play your class well, and also leads to more discovery as you kind of start to peel back the layers as you level. And so I don't know. I think this is just a lot better than kind of starting out as, hey, I'm a monk, but I'm also kind of this flex role as well. And then you just kind of like just generically get more powerful while you level. Like, this way seems like you're actually, I don't know, it feels more like you're growing. You're able to do more complex things, not just more powerful things. And it actually increases the difficulty as you play in a way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you grow into your skills, you grow into your skills, and it's not just about, finger reflexes and, like how quickly I can, how I can synchronize my clicking ability. It's more about like, I need to learn when to use this. That's one of the problems I have with a lot of MMOs actually is, when I go back to them, because you stop playing them for a while and then you go back to them, and you learning, in good MMOs, learning your skills is essential. And if you don't do that, you just end up doing the finger roll across the action bar, right? So I think this is important.
Yeah.
Like, this will keep people connected to Pantheon.
Oh yeah. I love this idea of growing in complexity. And I think having that kind of mastery where your class is, tenfold more deep at the end than it was at level, 8 makes you more tied to it, because you actually feel like you have a certain amount of expertise. You don't feel hot swappable for someone else. But another big takeaway was, I think, these kind of notes about milestone levels. So they stated that level 10 is something of a milestone for all classes. And the monk gets access to the first of their 5 chakra gates at that level now. So it's a big deal.
Yeah. I like those milestone abilities. I like the landmark abilities, that you get something, big at a sort of waypoint on your journey.
Yeah, it's like you're unlocking this key feature of your class, and then you're continuing to become more and more of your class at these big, like, chunky milestones. And in the same way they put that, so level 10 is kind of like, you've been playing really this very DPS focus very primary role focus. And then they said kind of the 10 to 20 experience is still, very much that focus, but you kind of become more specialized. And they list that the abilities and what you're getting through those levels is actually more group oriented gameplay. And
That's important.
yes, and that is when they start introducing just some off tanking. Again, it's that kind of pacing. I think just feels just right, man. I can't wait to play it, right? But I think it's natural, and I love that.
Yeah, I agree. Those are really good points, and we had that beta quite a while ago about the onboarding process and like when do you start introducing group stuff versus getting away from the solo stuff. And I think that you need to get that group stuff mixed in as soon as possible, but not I think this seems like the formula they're looking at now with the wizard now and now the monk description of how they're 1 to 10 is really your learning time, and then we're going to get the group stuff mixed in, and not like MMOs do it now, where you just everything at the end game where, that's where all the fun grouping stuff comes in. It's like, no, before that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm still holding out for like pre 10 groups for sure. I think the idea of group centric in this context has a lot to do with getting abilities that play off of others. But I still hope that there's grouping like super early on. If you'd like, you would just be very much like just your primary role. Like I could imagine not really being able to fulfill the off tanking situations, if there are any, in those low levels, which is fine.
For sure.
So let's get to another kind of significant thing. And I think this was kind of a key takeaway, since we've been talking about techniques a lot, right? And so this is a great example, and that's if the monk comes across a staff early on, they might find themselves gaining some different techniques versus what they would if they were just sticking to hand, which is, I guess, kind of the more like default, right? And so they describe the monk staff techniques as more focused on support, creation and capitalization of states, and controlling enemy position, while hand-to-hand is more about just raw damage and resource replenishment with maybe a little bit of CC like a stun. I love that they're introducing that differentiator right off the bat, and they even mentioned that like even readiness regen might be different between the two. And so what's super cool about this, Theric, is that what this means is if you happen to get a staff early on and you come across another monk, like let's say at level 10, you're already going to be differentiated from them. You're already going to be different. You're going to be what you have leaned into, if you chose to, keep working with that staff, right? Oh, that's so cool, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it is very cool, and gives your class identity, but also your personal identity, right? Your character identity,
right? Because the main thing is you're not splitting from your archetype early on or anything like that. There's nothing like that. You're just becoming a different, but still very much monk. That's so cool. Well, lastly, I have to point this out because I got to give props where it's due, and I got to touch on the whole chakra gate changes, because we've read about these before, and I think from the past videos and stuff, you could get a good idea of how this was working, even in practice, because we have videos of them using it. And so, but to kind of give a sloppy recap, just in case people have forgotten or haven't seen that, is the initial implementation of this mechanic was that you'd have access to different abilities based on which gate you had open. And that would happen, that would be like kind of initiated by the different abilities on your LAS. Like certain ones would open one gate, certain ones would open another. But it would mean that sometimes when you would have one gate open, several of your abilities on the LAS were basically unusable. And while the general idea was pretty cool, I think overall, I have to point this out because I just love that VR openly acknowledged that while the idea might have been cool, it didn't play out how they intended. And then after some feedback, they've gone through and they've changed the mechanic. It's, much less restricting, but it's still super situationally rewarding, and like for players that actually know what they're doing. and also more fun because you're not canceling out half of your LAS when you go into a certain gate, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the whole mediocre, player thing, like this is the kind of thing that's going to put the pedal to the metal, and test people because, you have to understand how these mechanics work. You're going to have
Yeah.
to, and if you don't, it's going to be a problem. And that's on you. That's on you as a player to invest yourself into the game enough so that you understand these things.
Yeah. And so the new system, from what they describe, is basically now, when a gate is opened, it acts more like a stance. And it just gives you kind of some passive bonuses. But at that point, you're like, oh man, they totally like washed this. They made this super simple. But no, it's passive bonuses, and it unlocks these unique effects for certain abilities while you have that gate open. So it's literally the best of both worlds. You're not canceling out your LAS, but for the person that knows what they're doing, they know, hey, if I'm in this gate, I should probably use these abilities. It's like it kind of achieves the same thing. Oh, what a great solution. It's wonderful.
Nice. Desrin approved.
Yeah. I mean, I've been really on an ability kick lately, right? Like so like this makes me so happy because it's a simple solution to make it more fun, but also just as make sure that proficiency is just as big of a deal. I have to just highlight that again. This just shows that VR is fine with admitting when something doesn't work out how they want, and even better, they're happy to kind of respond to feedback and change things to make their game better. And that's my super positive note today. Is
I like it. It's good. That's awesome, man. I could hear you talk about class abilities all day. That you've got such a good insight on them, and just the way that they get you excited is super fun to hear. Speaking of super fun, we got to mention Stonefish in the community feature of the newsletter. Stonefish is super fun. Like if you looked it up in the dictionary, he's got the most wacky sense of humor. The way that they word things, that the way that their posts are always sort of like worded in ridiculous ways, and just being good at starting conversations with ridiculous suggestions and ideas is so out there, and somebody who's not afraid to just, be goofy and, who cares what you think sort of thing. I love that mentality of, that's like, if I could change one thing about myself, I think I would be more like that sometimes. So if you want to go read up on Stonefish, go check the newsletter and read up about them. So
yeah,
it's good.
This might have been my favorite part of the newsletter, and like maybe
that's saying
to influence you to actually like read this. I have a few quotes that just are they're so Stonefish, but they're also so relatable, depending on your character, of course. But here are a few things just for a taste of what you could get from reading this. And one of the quotes is, "I read a lot, but remember little. And I love people, but enjoy them not being around me."
That's like, yeah, man. That's it. Exactly.
That's me. Yep.
It's honesty. It's like, it's everything you want in a statement.
And to go along with that, there's another one. He says, "I love you all. Now stay away from me." I'm going to use that, I think. And lastly, this I'm just going to quote this because this is perfect. What's your favorite part of the Pantheon community? Stonefish says, "The plethora of obviously undiagnosed mental maladies in combination with inquisitive and heartfelt good cheer."
Oh, exactly. That's what makes this all fun, because people are nuts and we love them.
Exactly.
That's what it's about, right? No, totally. So Stonefish is good people, and would be welcome in any group that I was adventuring with, just for the conversation, no matter what.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to leave our VR news for this week. So make sure you go over to pantheonmmo.com to read the entire newsletter. For notes here at Pantheon Plus, we're keeping you Pantheon patient with our fan community content, whether it's videos, whether it's streaming or fan fiction, or just having conversations on Discord. Personally, for me, I'm really up to my eyeballs in researching what the holidays on Terminus are.
The challenge
mentioned in the lore. It's been a serious challenge. It's been super hard. I had no idea it would be this hard. So I have no idea when the video is gonna be ready, but whatever. It's in the works. I'm working on it. Something that is ready to go is Drac and his EQ buddies loading up for the next TLP server launch with another No Sleep Till 40 stream. Now that's going to kick off on Thursday, May 26th, 9 a.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel. And I'm going to give you a little video teaser to whet your appetite for it. So check this out.
No!
Sleep!
Kill!
40! 40? What kind of noob game goes to 40?
That's right, you crazy EQ fanatics. We are back again this year for another EverQuest TLP server launch. This year, we'll be doing the Vanicky server. And if you haven't heard, that server is level locked at level 40. So we'll be going from level 1 all the way to level 40 all in one sitting. And we'll be starting that nice and early in the morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 26th.
But the fun doesn't stop there. We're going to be hitting a bunch of raid targets. We're going to be camping high-level mobs. We're going to be on for the whole weekend. So strap in, kiddos.
But we're gonna sleep at some point, right?
Who knows? You'll have to tune in and join us at twitch.tv/Pantheon Plus to find out.
I'm already tired. I'm gonna take a nap to get ready.
Pantheon Plus is not responsible for sleep depravity, sleep deprivation, or other sleep disorders. Please consult a doctor before staying up more than 12 hours at a time. If you stay up more than 24 hours watching the No Sleep Till 40 stream, you may experience nausea, headaches, and the urge to buy chrono and or lease a vehicle. Please note that while we love EverQuest and are excited for this stream, if Pantheon Rise of the Fallen launches alpha before this date, we will drop EQ like a hot potato and will be no-lifing Pantheon alpha. Pantheon is a crowdfunded MMO, so please go head over to pantheonmmo.com/pledge and help support the movement. All rights reserved, onward and upward.
So if you plan actually on playing on either of the new EQ TLP servers and you're looking for a guild, you can join our Discord and check the announcements channel because we have some friends that are looking for Pantheon community people to actually join up in their guild. So we put up a little share on that, and you can be able to see what they're up to, and if you want to join. In terms of our calendar for the week, here it is. You'll see on Monday, Fox is streaming Lord of the Rings Online, 7 p.m. Eastern. Drac and his buddies are, of course, doing Midnight at EQ Adventures. Now, Tuesday is a big one because Bazgrim is doing the Pantheon Jeopardy. Now, Bazgrim's not a part of Pantheon Plus. He's his own thing, of course. But we're all going to be there. We're going to be hanging out watching Pantheon Jeopardy because we want to see what goes on there. And I'm interested. This is going to be super fun. So Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on BazgrimTV on his Twitch channel. Come hang out with us and have some fun. Wednesday, Sparrow is on her Twitch channel playing Lord of the Rings Online, 9 p.m. Eastern. On Friday, our buddy Redbeard Flynn is doing a video on YouTube up talking about the longest running MMOs. So that's interesting. I'm curious to see what he has to say about that. Sparrow's doing P99 that evening on her Twitch channel. I believe it's on her Twitch channel. And yeah, that's the week for May 23rd to 29th for us here at Pantheon Plus. Like I said, join our Discord. We can continue the discussions we have, whether it's on the Rewind here or on Classes 101 or anything else like that. So we'll leave it there, and that's it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, folks. Let's do a bit of fun speculation today for our community discussion. This thread comes to us from Enoden on the official Pantheon forums, and it's titled Flex Rolls, purely speculative. There we go. So basically, Enoden points out that in one of the recent streams, maybe even multiple actually, Joppa kind of mentioned that each class will be able to flex into a secondary role in some way. So based off of this, as Enoden puts it, they make two assumptions. So one, that there will eventually be 3 classes in each primary role, except damage, which, they'll have more than 3. And 2, that each of the 3 classes for each primary role will have a different flex role. So whether or not that's true, I figured just for fun, we could kind of go over Enoden's list and, see what they might think about the various classes and the flex roles. So,
yeah, I'm curious. I hadn't really ever actually thought about this. This is an interesting topic.
Yeah, and it's just too appropriate for what we were chatting about earlier. So yeah, let's kind of hit through this, and if we think it works, that's great. We'll move on. If we think it might be something else, maybe we'll have a little chat here. So
yeah, a little discussion.
And we'll Enoden. This is just for fun, bud. Thanks for putting this thread up, and we don't know either. So, all right. So let's start with the tanks. So warrior, right off the bat, Enoden has it set to flex into support.
Yeah, it's funny because my brain would have said going into heals, into a healer role right away. But, I guess I just think of like a warrior cleric being the default. But I don't know. Interesting to see where they go with
So
that.
I actually think this is accurate because of the banners. I think the warrior, in spite of being, the kind of beefiest brute force AC kind of focused master tactician, I think the support side leans into the tactician bit where they're a commander, they're a leader, and they have these banners.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
They've talked about that on an old co-stream. He was asking about the banners, and they did sort of describe it that way. You're right. So good call.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got Paladin next, and this one makes too much sense to me. So this one flexes into heal, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, it's got to be the heal, right? That one has to be the heal for
easy.
sure.
So that's an easy one, Enoden.
Yeah.
Dire Lord flex into damage.
Well, So the Dire Lord, let's think about the primary role right now, right? They're like the anti-magic tank. That's their primary. The way they've been described is good against casters, good against things. So we know what would be a logical flex from a anti-caster role. Maybe just, I guess, more damage against casters. Maybe. Yeah, I guess.
Maybe. I was kind of torn between support and damage, because damage makes sense just because I played the Dread Knight and Vanguard and I associate it a lot, I'll admit. But I also think of what's that ability that you put it on one mob and it like spreads that the Dire Lord has?
Oh, right.
What is I don't remember. but like that kind of thing makes me want to lean into maybe they could be damage. Plus they're hopefully going to be two-handed tank focused, and that just strikes me as damage. So I think Enoden's accurate on this one.
Yeah, probably like a dot kind of damage.
Yeah,
right?
drain tank or whatever you want to call it.
Drain tank. Yeah, that's right.
All right, let's get into healers. So this one obviously I'll be a little passionate on the last one here, but so the cleric, Enoden says they might flex into tank.
Huh. Yeah. Battle cleric.
Yeah.
Right?
Heavy armor.
You use heavy armor. You also one of the skills, I'm thinking about the cleric's class page, and one of their primary skills sets is there's like a celestial barrier that they have access to, right? I'm trying to remember what it's called. I could look it up if I was really energetic, but there's like a celestial barrier that they can put down, and it basically puts them in a bubble, so to speak, or maybe others in a bubble. I don't remember. So I could, so like a sort of a what's like an immunity tank, like a temporary immunity kind of tank.
Yeah. I could see it. And maybe even since they have heavy armor, I could imagine like intercessions. Right. I think that would be really cool. So I think Enoden's right on this one too. I think the tank off roll is good. Now the shaman.
Sure.
Shaman flex into support. I think this one's obvious because the shaman they've got debuffs, right? That seems to be part of their kit is diminishing the opponent. With all their chrono stuff, with the other. I think this is an easy one.
Time walk and all the things they can do. Yeah. So, they're already almost like, just from what we've seen of them in terms of as a pure healer, they're the closest to being not a pure healer already. Yeah. Right. So, it's pretty easy to sort of slide them into that. The other stuff they do become the primary thing. And then whether that's debuffing or whether that's, controlling the flow of battle through some sort of time mechanic, which would, be amazing.
Oh, dude, you're telling me.
We'll see.
Yep. Yeah, I think this one's right. Support. Okay, so we're here. Druid.
So what are you going to be? Yeah, what's your deal?
So Enoden has it listed to flex into damage. And all I got to say is...
So we're talking about Druid.
I got to say, God, I hope so. Like, I would love to have Druid be a healer primary and a flex roll of damage. Come on.
Well, see, what's funny about that is because in a lot of, maybe other games, MMOs and single player RPGs, the druids tend to flex more into tank roles because they can transform into like
that's
bears,
true.
right? They become beefier. They become like a, some sort of a creature that can take a lot of hits, take some damage to sort of support the tank role. So I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe damage. Probably more of an elemental type of druid in that respect,
Yeah.
as opposed to like a shapeshifter. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this is one we have like so little information on, I want it to be damage,
yeah.
but like you said, if they pull some influences from that, like shape shifting, yeah, I could see it being tank or whatever, but I think Crowsinger could testify with me that we just want lightning. We want storms.
Well, she just wants Herode.
Yeah,
she wants Herode on her shoulder.
That too. But what if Herode could call lightning upon a spot or so? I don't know. I want. Or
what if Herode could transform into a giant Herode and take all the punishment?
Oh, now we're getting there. Oh, man. Okay, we should let's get into the support primary category here.
Yes.
So first off, let's start with the one that's actually in the it's actually in the game. We'll do Enchanter, and the flex was damage.
Well, interesting, because from what we've seen of the Enchanter, and we have seen quite a bit of it, or at least some of it, they haven't really showed off any kind of a flex role for the Enchanter. So this really makes it a mystery. I don't think it's damage. That wouldn't be my go-to. I would think more something else, but I don't know what else. It just, nothing seems right.
This was a fun one to really like quickly think about, because I agree with you. I think damage is kind of like the default flex that you could think of anything, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm a this, but I can also damage, because that's what all the other games do. But for this, it made me kind of try to expand my mind a little bit and think, what is healing? Does healing have to be your HP pool? And so I kind of think of Enchanter as maybe flexing into healing in a not typical way, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Maybe like a mana healer, but that's kind of what they do.
The only other alternative, I would say tanks by charm, by proxy of charm. If you can count that, maybe. So this one's up in the air for me, man. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm gonna, you know what? I know you've got Necro and Bard here, but how are we gonna do this? We don't know anything about them to begin with.
Again, this is all just.
I think we should veto these two. Yeah, these are a little. We're speculating on what their primary role would be.
Well, we know. Well, that's true. We know it's Bard is support, right? And
I don't know what that looks like.
I have to talk about Bard though, because there's a post in the thread that I just love the follow up for, and so. Originally, Enoden puts Bard as flexing into tank, which I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But later in the thread, someone says Bard just flexes into more support. And
more support.
And then
you just go faster.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I'm going to support you even harder. But the wingless comes in and says Bard flexing into even harder support makes me laugh, because that was my first instinct, seeing that as well. A jack of all trades becomes more jacked.
more jacked. I like it.
Oh, man.
Like it. Now let's get to the deep.
Okay. Sorry, Redbeard. Theric's vetoing the Necro.
I'm vetoing the Necro.
All right, so let's start with Rogue. I mean, this is easy, right? Flex into support.
Yeah.
Okay. Easy. Called it.
One.
Monk, flex into tank. Yep. We just talked about this.
About it earlier.
Ranger.
Yep. Ranger. We flex into more damage. That's all we do.
Exactly. And so we're here. We're here again. The Ranger just gets more ranged.
When you see a Ranger flex, they're not talking about like flexing your roll. They're talking about like flexing their biceps, because that's what the Ranger flex is.
Oh, this is a tough one too, because I feel like we don't have a lot of information on what a potential flex could be. I think a lot of EQ folks might say tank, right?
Here's what I'm gonna say. Ranger's gonna flex into support, but it's gonna be like travel support. It's gonna be like scouting support. Right? That kind of support, tracking, scouting, and the hawks, the weasel, or whatever it is we get, and tracking again needs to be in there.
Different kind of support though, yeah.
Yeah, like a different kind of support.
I think I'm totally with that, and that's what Enoden put as well, was support, and
Yeah.
I could see that. And again, we're broadening the define of support to be more than CC now. That's what's important.
Yeah.
And then
Totally.
we got Summoner flex into tank, probably through the pet, right?
I would think so. That makes sense. Get a beefy tank, a beefy pet going, get one of those Archimentals going. And,
Equip, deck them
um,
out with like tank, whatever gear, however that works, right?
and plus you're leveling them up, right? And you're developing their abilities because they've talked about
Yeah,
that.
true. I think this one makes sense. Yeah, I think tank is
Sure.
right in line. And then wizard, So I know all the wizards are going to be like, yeah, we flex into more damage. Like
Yeah, they just want to steal the Ranger Thunder, of course.
Exactly. And this one was a kind of questionable one for Enoden, saying, support, maybe. I jokingly say tank, because that's just that's the MMO stereotype, right? Just pull the aggro.
Yeah, that's right. They inadvertently flex into tank because they do too much damage.
Accidental tank flexing.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Battle mage, it's hard to say. Thinking archetypes, but I think again, wizard is another class that we've seen played on stream, and they haven't really had a flex.
They're very straightforward, right?
They haven't. It has been very straightforward, So I think this is something that we could probably stand to see a little bit more evidence of in the future.
Yeah, if they have one at all. And this is kind of the great place to wrap up, because one of the best parts about the classes and every game design element of Pantheon is not just making everyone equal in the sense of balance, right? So maybe Wizard doesn't flex. Maybe that's their thing.
Right.
They're just boom.
Yeah, certainly possible. I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, this is a really fun discussion, and I strongly encourage anyone that went through this list to maybe give your list. What do you think is going to be the flex role of all of these different classes? And I'm really eager to see what people come up with, because this is a really fun little bit of speculation. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what people say about that.
Yeah. Well, then that'll be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, folks, super quick actually one today, but big nonetheless. So first off, we got to talk about Crowsinger submitting the final chapter of her fan fiction, In This Way of Storms, of course, which is live now on Pantheon.plus. And man, this has been almost exactly a year in the making, and she's finally got it all wrapped up. It's awesome. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm gonna read it from cover to cover.
Yeah, and speaking of that, she posted some really handy kind of ebook friendly versions of the whole tale, all kind of put together for people like myself that want to just read from start to finish that whole thing all at once. And both, I'll put two separate links down in the show notes. One is going to be for the chapter 23, and one is going to be for the ebook versions that she so handily provided, and I can't wait. I can't wait to read that whole thing now.
For sure.
Video side, we've got Mr. Sir theNathanNAPALM dropping a hype-tastic video about last week's developer livestream, as I think you would expect.
Yep. Always get your blood
That's
flowing.
That's right. Also, want to shout out a few things from Bazgrim. First, he did do a dev live stream, Baz Flash, and also did a watch party that it always falls on a Friday, which is like an awkward time for us scripting. But I do want to shout it out in case you want to, if you miss it on Thursday, the dev live stream, he goes through it on Friday and does it live. So it's pretty fun. You already mentioned it, but I feel like this is going to be, I just want to get this in people's heads because this is going to be fun. Pantheon Jeopardy coming this week, Tuesday, May 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern. So make sure to be there for that. I'm pretty sure that we're going to get a nice crowd and it's going to be so fun. And it's Bazgrim, so you're probably going to learn some things, right?
Yes, yeah, and these things tend to attract the VR devs. So again, like, don't be surprised if we're all there, and maybe some VR devs pop in, and they maybe a question gets asked and answered, and they say, maybe update us with a little bean or something. Who knows?
Maybe. Either way, it's going to be good fun. I hope to get as many people there as possible and just have a good time.
Yeah.
So again, Tuesday night, be there. And that is going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Mail on a Sunday? That's right. Let's check the mailbox. All right. Well, we have certainly neglected the mailbox for a long time. I don't think we've had any mail we've read any mail for a little while. We've had some mail, and I have to say, when I went to open it, I think there was something living inside the mailbox. So it's best
sorry
time
about
we clear
that.
it out. So. Was that something you put in there?
I forgot about it, and you never. I guess it's grown, maybe. But what are you gonna do?
Well, whatever it was, it ran away. We need to get these things done quick because it's going to come back and chew my face off or something. So, Desiree, let's rapid fire these questions. I've got 2 mail questions for us this week, and there's 2 more we're going to get to next week. But we'll start with these 2. The first one is from Colin 104, and Colin 104 asks, for the fish within the oceans and rivers that can be fished, speared, or caught with a net, should the perception system give a notification describing the catch? Would this notification contain statistics about the fish you'd caught, length, weight, male or female, or some other statistic? So this is kind of interesting because, that goes back to the DRT roundtable that NFL did about crafting and, talking about water being sort of a node, sort of a different kind of a node, and how fishing is going to be in the game and how they're going to do it. We don't know yet. Now, this sounds a lot to me like Final Fantasy XIV fishing.
Sure.
Where you are definitely, you have like a fish logbook and all this stuff. But he's asking, should perception system be used for this? And my answer is actually no, because the way perception's been described to us is that it's more of like a DM in a D&D session, describing sort of your things that are, you're sensing in the world around you in terms of, mystical or maybe an ethereal kind of voice. This seems to me a little too practical for the use of the perception system. Would you?
I would agree with that assessment, but I do think the perception system should be involved. And
interesting.
Because you got on Vanguard before I could, I'm going to get on Elden Ring before you can in this. And
nice.
The lovely descriptions for the items in Elden Ring that give hints towards lore and things like that.
Oh my God, yes. Do I know them? Yes.
I think that should be how item descriptions work in Pantheon. And I think fish involves.
1000%. You have no idea. I have a whole directory full of screenshots of items and their descriptions because that's how I'm ingesting the lore, is taking screenshots. Every time I find something in Elden Ring, I screenshot it, and then I go later and I edit the image and I cut it down, and then I save it as, I retitle it to what it is. Like, I've kind of gotten nuts with it. So if that's the way they do it for fishing,
that makes me so happy, because I know I hype that up a lot. Like when I was talking to everyone about Elden Ring, and I was really hoping you would attach to that. But yeah, like that, it just makes sense to me, because if you're not doing perception, what do you care, right? But if you are, it's just another layer that they could describe the world and give hints. And why not include fishing with that? I'm sure you won't just be getting fish anyway. So
totally. So good question,
absolutely.
Colin. Appreciate it. Then the next one comes from Zergjerk, and he actually asks about something we talked about earlier with the monk. He says, do you think adding positional or reactionary layers on melee skills is a waste of time, or does it add more engagement? So for like example, having a dagger with a style like poke when used in front for normal damage, or if you evade, you get a 2-second stun. If used from the side, you get a bleed. Like, so having different positional abilities, I guess, on your weapons. I answered the first one first. So Desiree, what do you think about that?
100,000%. Again, I'm kind of like, I'm on a ability roller coaster here, and like anything to make abilities more interesting and involved and complex, I'm pretty much here for. Like I'm totally cool with this being like a mastery upgrade or something like that. But I love these kind of things. It makes you take one ability on your LAS and be able to do different things, and you have to know what those things are to execute what you're intending. And that's way more engaging than hit button, do stab.
Yeah, exactly. So Zerjerk will be happy to hear that from you. I tend to agree. I think maybe this is something that could be tied in with techniques. Because I don't know if you want to attach it too much to a class ability, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, I think we have actually seen some of this with the rogue abilities. When Minus showcased the rogue abilities last year before, whatever it was, he did a really good job of explaining in detail how each ability worked. And I think there was some of this going on with that. So it'll be interesting to see how much this idea does get fleshed out in the final game design. So, but it's a fun one for sure, and it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, just to add, because you mentioned techniques, I think you're right on that. I think this makes more sense to have to do with like the weapon, but I think the big takeaway for me is that a lot of these attacks, maybe you shouldn't just be prevented from doing them. Maybe you should be able to do them in the wrong way. Like if you try to backstab someone up front, there's no reason you can try and waste your cooldown. Might not do much damage, but I would prefer that than just saying you cannot do this ability because you are not flanking the target.
Yeah, which is pretty much what you usually see, right? You get some red text telling you you're not doing it right.
Yep.
So
anyway, great question.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, great question. Thanks, Zerjerk, for asking that. So again, like I said, there's 2 more questions in the mailbox. We'll get to those next week. Just being mindful of the time of the show here, and that's it for the mailbox. Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. All right, we're back to finish up the Tale of the Humans for our lore segment this week. We're going to get to know the royal lineage of Avendir a little better. So who was the first king out of the Sanctum, and as he came to be known? And how has his persona inspired or fractured the humans of Terminus? So listen along as the words of J.N. Gerhardt as I read them to the conclusion of the human lore and Pantheon. When the Deicide War turned in favor of the Sacred Six Races, Avendir gained a broad reputation for battlefront leadership and also for his gift of stirring oration. His famed Speech of Souls is still repeated amongst the humans and elves, credited with reviving the hearts of the surviving dead, a reference to the broken-hearted victors of the war. With the bold vision of his father, the first king out of the Sanctum inspired his people with the founding of Thronefast, a coastal seat of power that flourished into the preeminent trade and commerce hub on Terminus. At the time of Avendir's death in 525 IH, the capital city had no equal in wealth or influence, no peer in beauty or acclaim, and his passing was honored across 4 continents. Over 450 years later, the humans are still prospering, though the heritage of sacrifice and service has been exchanged for vice amongst much of the aristocracy. Nevertheless, Amanthiel, the Lady King, a true blood heir of Avendir, has shown traits of her ancestors' character and composure. Since the horrifying catastrophe at Azeris took the life of her husband, as well as her predecessor to the throne, Amanthiel's nerve and shrewdness thwarted enemies of a suddenly weakened Thronefast. In a speech shouted to peasant and well-born alike, Amanthiel set the course of the nation like a steady captain emerging from the clutches of a maelstrom. While the humans have endured yet another peril, their city glimmers like the ancient crown set upon their fair regent's dauntless brow. For now. And that is the lore you know. So I want to say thank you, everyone, for hanging around with us today. Again, I'm being mindful of time. I know that we're pushing the time limits a little bit these days, but we certainly hope you enjoyed episode number 102. Desrin, my salty friend, I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Of course you had to say salty. It's too perfect.
I'm just trying to coax another pirate voice out of you, to be honest with you. You know, what can I do? He just sort of waffles on it. He's like, no, it's not happening. Anyway, yeah, good stuff, man. All the content we discussed in the show is linked in the video description for your show notes, or in the show notes for you to check out. Remember, we value any feedback you care to share when you're listening to the Rewind, so it makes us make the podcast better and become the best Pantheon podcast out there. And with that, I'll say, see you next time. Cheers, and thanks for listening.
Arr, we be coming back next week.
That's so good. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.